Imagine being left for dead on the highest mountain in the world. It's a scenario so extreme, it feels like fiction. But on Mount Everest, the line between life and death is thinner than the air you breathe. This is a place of unparalleled beauty and unforgiving brutality, a place that has called to the hearts of adventurers for a century. They come seeking glory, transcendence, a test of the human spirit against the raw power of nature. They come to stand on the roof of the world. But the mountain always has the final say. It is a silent arbiter of fate, and for every triumphant story etched into its slopes, there are countless others of tragedy and loss. The price of ambition here can be absolute. This is the story of Lincoln Hall, a man who knew these risks better than most. He wasn't a novice chasing a thrill, he was a seasoned Australian mountaineer, a veteran of the Himalayas, and a living legend in the climbing community. In 1984 he was part of the first Australian team to forge a new route up Everest's north face, coming within a few hundred meters of the summit before being forced to turn back to save a frostbitten climbing partner. The mountain had denied him once, but it had never left his mind. For 22 years, the ghost of that summit haunted him. He wrote a book about the experience, calling it White Limbo, a testament to the profound and often painful grip the mountain held on him. Now, in May of 2006, at the age of 50, he was back. He was back to finish what he started, to finally stand on that elusive peak and close a chapter of his life that had been left open for 2 decades. He was climbing for himself, for his family, and for the memory of that first arduous attempt. On May 25th, after weeks of acclimatization and grueling effort, Lincoln Hall achieved his lifelong dream. He stood at 8,848 meters on the very pinnacle of the planet. The world unfolded beneath him, a panorama of peaks and clouds. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated triumph. But on Everest, the summit is only halfway. The descent is statistically the most dangerous part of any climb. Your body is depleted, your oxygen is running low, and your mind, euphoric and exhausted, is prone to critical errors. As Lincoln began his journey down, something inside him began to fail. He was in the death zone, the region above 8,000 meters where the human body can no longer acclimatize. Here the oxygen pressure is only a third of what it is at sea level. Without supplemental oxygen, the body is quite literally dying. Cells begin to break down. The brain and lungs, starved of oxygen, start to swell, a condition known as high-altitude cerebral edema, or HACE. It is insidious and swift. Judgment evaporates, replaced by confusion, hallucinations, and a complete loss of coordination. This is what was happening to Lincoln Hall. He grew weak, disoriented, and began to lag behind. His Sherpa guides, themselves exhausted and at the limits of their endurance, tried desperately to assist him. For 2 agonizing hours, they struggled with him, pleading, dragging, and willing him to move, but Lincoln's condition worsened. He collapsed in the snow, unresponsive. The Sherpas checked for a pulse, for breath. They found nothing. In the brutal calculus of high-altitude mountaineering, a choice had to be made. To stay with him would mean their own certain death. Their oxygen was critically low, the weather was turning, and night was falling. The expedition leader, Alexander Abramov, listening to the desperate radio reports from base camp, made the impossible call. The Sherpas were ordered to save themselves. They had to descend. After retrieving his pack and personal effects to return to his family, they left him, believing him to be gone. A radio call was made to his wife and 2 sons in Australia. Lincoln Hall was dead. To spend a night alone, unsheltered, and without oxygen in the death zone is considered a death sentence. No one in history had ever survived it. The temperature would drop to -40 degrees, the wind would tear at any exposed skin, and the lack of oxygen would slowly, systematically shut down every organ in his body. For 12 hours Lincoln Hall lay in the snow, a ghost on the roof of the world, while his family grieved an ocean away. The mountain had claimed him, but Everest, as always, had other plans. The next morning, another team was making its way toward the summit. American guide Dan Mazer, his client Miles Osborne, and their Sherpa guide were on their own final push. They were in the rhythm of the climb. Step, breathe, step, breathe. Their world narrowed to the path ahead, and the singular goal of the summit. They were aware of the tragedy that had occurred the day before. News travels fast on the mountain. They passed the usual grim landmarks, discarded oxygen bottles, tattered prayer flags, and the frozen bodies of climbers from seasons past, permanent fixtures on the route known as Rainbow Valley. Then, just below the summit, they stumbled upon a surreal, impossible sight. A man was sitting on the edge of a deadly 10,000-foot drop, cross-legged, as if meditating. His downsuit was unzipped to his waist, his arms exposed to the elements. He had no oxygen mask, no hat, no gloves. He was just there. Mazur and his team stared in stunned silence. Their first thought was that it was a body, frozen in a strange position. But then, the man turned his head and spoke. "I imagine you're surprised to see me here?" The words, slurred and otherworldly, hung in the thin air. It was Lincoln Hall. He was confused, shivering, and severely frostbitten, but unbelievably, impossibly, he was alive. He had survived the night. He was a ghost who had come back to life. Imagine what was going through their minds. The summit, the culmination of their dreams, was just 2 hours away. They had spent years planning, training, and tens of thousands of dollars for this single moment. And now, they were faced with a profound moral choice. This was the same season that another climber, David Sharp, had frozen to death near the summit, as dozens of other climbers reportedly passed him by, intent on their own goals. The incident had sent shockwaves through the mountaineering world, sparking a fierce debate about the ethics of climbing. Do you pursue your personal ambition, or do you stop to help a fellow human being, even if it means sacrificing your dream and risking your own life? For Dan Mazur and his team, there was no debate. The summit is still there, Mazur would later say, but this is a man. They didn't hesitate. They immediately abandoned their summit attempt. They gave Lincoln their own oxygen, hot tea, and whatever medication they had. They sat with him, trying to warm him, trying to bring him back from the brink. Mazur got on the radio, his voice crackling with urgency and disbelief, broadcasting to all teams on the mountain. "We have a man, a ghost up here. He says his name is Lincoln Hall. Can anyone help?" The response was immediate and overwhelming. Alexander Abramov, the same expedition leader who had declared Lincoln dead, now mobilized a massive rescue effort. He dispatched a team of 12 Sherpas from lower camps, a small army armed with fresh oxygen, a stretcher, and medical supplies. They were to ascend as fast as humanly possible to meet Mazur's team and help bring Lincoln down. The brotherhood of the rope, the unwritten code of the mountains, had kicked in. A man's life was on the line, and nothing else mattered. What followed was one of the most remarkable and arduous rescues in Everest's history. Lincoln was still suffering from severe cerebral edema. He was hallucinating, combative, and had to be alternately dragged, carried, and cajoled down the mountain's most treacherous sections. It took 11 grueling hours for the combined teams to get him from the high slopes down to the relative safety of advanced base camp at the North Colonel. It was an epic feat of endurance and selflessness, a testament to the courage of Dan Mazur, his team, and the incredible strength of the Sherpas who risked everything to bring a ghost back to the world of the living. Back in the relative safety of a tent at advanced base camp, the immediate cost of survival was brutally apparent. Lincoln Hall was alive, but only just. His fingers, once nimble tools of a master climber, were now waxy, wooden, and blackened by severe frostbite. The cold had seeped past skin and muscle, freezing the very cells in his extremities. Every breath was a ragged, painful battle against a burgeoning chest infection, a dangerous complication at any altitude, but a potential death sentence here, miles above the world of modern medicine. He was a ghost of the man who had set out for the summit, his body a roadmap of trauma. Yet, within this shattered vessel, a flicker of life, a stubborn will, remained. And that flicker was about to send a shockwave across the globe. A satellite phone was placed in his hand. On the other end of the line, half a world away in Australia, his wife, Barbara, answered. She was a woman preparing to grieve, having been informed hours earlier that her husband was dead, his body left on the mountain where he fell. She was steeling herself for a call confirming the tragedy. Instead, through the static and the vast distance, she heard a voice. It was weak, slurred from cerebral edema and exhaustion, but it was unmistakably his. "I imagine you'll be surprised to hear from me," Lincoln managed to say. Surprise wasn't the word. It was a moment of impossible resurrection, a voice calling out from beyond the grave. That call wasn't just a conversation, it was a miracle broadcast over a satellite, a testament to the fact that Lincoln Hall was, against all logic and all reports, still alive. For Barbara, and soon the world, it was a moment that defied comprehension. This personal miracle unfolded against a backdrop of public tragedy and intense scrutiny. The 2006 Everest season was exceptionally deadly, with 10 other climbers losing their lives on its unforgiving slopes. The mountain was making headlines for all the wrong reasons. Just days before Lincoln's ordeal, the death of a British climber named David Sharp had ignited a firestorm of controversy. An estimated 40 climbers were said to have passed by Sharp as he lay dying, a grim testament to a perceived erosion of the climber's code. The world was asking a hard question: had the commercialization of Everest, the summit fever, and the sheer number of people on the mountain created a culture where human life was secondary to personal ambition? Had the soul of mountaineering been lost? It was in this exact climate of moral crisis that Lincoln's story emerged. Not just as a tale of survival, but as a powerful counter-narrative. Lincoln's story is a deep dive into the very definition of impossible odds. He had spent the night alone without oxygen, food, or shelter at 8,700 meters in the death zone. At this altitude, the human body is actively dying. The lack of oxygen pressure causes capillaries to leak fluid into the lungs and brain. For Lincoln, this manifested as high-altitude cerebral edema, a condition that causes confusion, hallucinations, loss of coordination, and ultimately, death. He was found by his own team, but after hours of trying to help him descend, he collapsed, was declared deceased by the Sherpas, and the expedition leader made the heart-wrenching decision to leave him to save the rest of the team. This wasn't a malicious choice, but a brutal calculation based on decades of high-altitude experience. No one survives a night in the open, in that condition, at that altitude. It had never happened. The story is also one of hard choices that define character. The first was the agonizing decision by Lincoln's own team to leave him. But the second, and perhaps more profound choice, came the following morning. American guide Dan Mazur and his team were on their way to the summit, the culmination of months of training and tens of thousands of dollars. As they traversed the ridge, they saw something impossible: a man, sitting cross-legged with his down suit unzipped to the waist, trying to change his shirt as if he were on a sunny beach. It was Lincoln Hall. He was frostbitten, delirious, but undeniably alive. In that moment, Mazur faced a choice that defined the season: continue to the summit, the dream of a lifetime, or abandon it all for a stranger with almost no chance of survival. He chose the stranger. He and his team stopped, gave Lincoln their own oxygen, and radioed for help, sacrificing their own ambitions for a chance, however slim, to save a life. This is a story about the incredible, almost supernatural strength to keep going when everything, including your own body and the laws of physiology, says you can't. After being discovered, the fight was far from over. It took a team of 12 heroic Sherpas, mobilized in a massive rescue effort, to get him down. For nearly 9 hours, they cajoled, dragged, and carried the barely coherent Lincoln down from the summit ridge to the safety of Camp 4. He had spent nearly 2 full days in the death zone, most of it without supplemental oxygen. He had come back from a place no one returns from. Lincoln Hall came back from the edge, and in doing so, he rewrote a chapter in the history of Everest. His survival became a beacon of hope in one of the mountain's darkest seasons. It was a powerful reminder of the compassion that still exists in the world's highest places, a testament to the heroism of Dan Mazur, his team, and the Sherpas who refused to give up. The physical toll was immense. He would lose the tips of all his fingers and a toe, but he had won the ultimate prize. He returned to his family, a living ghost who walked back into the world. His story is not just extraordinary, it challenges our perception of the line between life and death. It proves that sometimes the human spirit's refusal to break is the most powerful force on earth. If a man can survive that, alone in the killing cold, and be brought back by the compassion of strangers, it should give us all pause. If that doesn't give you chills and a profound sense of wonder at the tenacity of life, I don't know what will.